meeting to order. We're going to start this evening's meeting with public comments. So we'll begin the public comments on the FY17 proposed budget. Those wishing to speak during the public comment must have submitted a completed request to speak form to staff at the room entrance prior to the beginning of the public comment period. Please preface your statement with your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. You will have 2 minutes to comment. There are lights on the timer. The yellow light indicates that you have 30 seconds remaining, and the sound will indicate the end of 2 minutes. Right. So first up for public comment, we have Kiwan Rowe, followed by James Kempler.
My name is Kiwan Ryu. I live at the 1661 Stony Ridge Road. I belong to the ward number 2, the Mrs. Taylor. And I came with the president of Eugene Jinju Sister City Committee, Candice Shura. So we'll be talking together. So why don't you start?
Okay, I'm Candice Shorak, and I live in Ward 3 at 945 East 23rd Avenue in Eugene. And as Kiwan said, I'm the president of the Eugene Jinju Sister City Committee. And we have enjoyed the support of the city in a lot of ways and would like to maintain and enhance that. In October, I had a chance to go to our sister city, and it was really interesting how much value they place on our relationship. It's been going for 55 years, and they were basically, this was all in Korean, Kiwan told me later, but they were all basically begging Kiwan, take 10 students to Eugene, because our program is personal. And the mayor of Jinju has been comparing the results and found that, wow, the kids who go to Eugene come back and have a great experience, their English is better, et cetera, et cetera. So Kiwan talked him down to 6, but anyway, that's just one example, and we're so proud of the youth who we've sent from this area. I love the fact that a lot of the kids who've gone are from immigrant families, because Korea, is a mono-ethnic group, and we've sent, kids who have a whole variety of ethnic backgrounds and this and that. So that really is neat too. But with the bigger numbers in the past, we had $5,000 a year of support, but in the last few years, it's been down to $2,500, and in a year we spend about $6,360. Okay, thank you.
James Kempler, followed by Peter Knox.
My name is Jim Nepler. I live at 409 Salty Way in Eugene and Ward 7. I'm here to speak for the Eugene Kakegawa Sister City Committee. That's our sister city in Japan. We've had a relationship with Kakegawa for 37 years. We host high school students in the spring for a couple of days. It's not like the university program of interns for months and months, just a couple of days. And we find them host families to, for a place to stay. That doesn't cost the city of Eugene a dime. That's all done, by volunteer effort. We also host adults in the fall for a couple of days. We send a delegation in the fall as well to Kakegawa for a couple of days. Our delegation outbound costs the city nothing. It's the inbound adults that is our main expense. We have to provide ground transportation, give them a place to stay, and we give a small stipend to the host families, $150 usually, plus a welcome dinner, that kind of thing. So it's not a very expensive program, but it has great value for the people who have participated in it. We hear about lifelong friendships and people like Councilor Pryor and others who have gone who will attest to the cross-cultural value of the experience. We're also finding that Eugene products are showing up in greater numbers in Kakegawa. Glory Bee honey sticks and Euphoria chocolate, something else, can't think of it. full city coffee as well. We bring these as gifts. They ask us to provide them for their festivals. We do, and there's a trade relationship built there too. So there are lots of values. We can't really do it on the $2,500 that funding is now suggested for the program. In the past, it was $75, then to $5. So thank you very much.
Peter Knox, followed by Deb Jones.
Good evening. My name is Peter Knox. I am the chair of Downtown Neighborhood Association. I live at 265 West 8th, and I'm, of course, in Ward 1. I'm going to talk a little bit with you about neighborhood funding. And as you know, once again, we have a proposal to cut back that funding because, from the outside, it appears like there's this money that could be cut because not all neighborhoods get to spend their money. But some neighborhoods like mine are small, so they don't get a lot of money. This has an effect. If you cut that money, that means our allocation will actually be smaller. Some neighborhoods which are much larger, like Churchill, have something like 10,000 addresses, so they can afford an economy of scale, if you will, to put out newsletters. Whereas my neighborhood, we get to put out a few postcards a year telling people to come to our neighborhood meeting. Why is this important? It's incredibly important. Next week, we will be having our first meeting with a MUPTI applicant, and we aren't able, because we didn't, the confluence of things, we haven't been able to mail anything out to advertise that. Now that's incredibly wrong, I think, in the spirit of trying to have MUPTI applicants come to neighborhoods. If you can't have the neighborhood do the outreach to let people know that that's happening, that's amongst other things, just one thing that's a policy thing that council has said, we want to do this. Well, please fund us. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb Jones, followed by Carlos Herrera.
My name is Deb Jones. I live in Eugene in Ward 1. So I serve on the board of Friendly Area Neighbors, and I'm also a current co-chair of the Neighborhood Leaders Council. I'm asking for your support to keep at least the $55,000 in funding for neighborhood outreach and matching grants, and also for more flexibility to work with staff on how to spend the funds most efficiently, especially at the end of a fiscal year. Funding for 4 mailings from each neighborhood association would let us do more good work for the city. Right now, many associations have funding for only 2 or 3 mailings a year, and some of those are only postcards. We are a very cost-effective conduit of information about city projects to residents. The content of the Friendly newsletter, of which I happen to be an editor right now, also contains at least 50 to 75% content that is directly related to city projects, whether it's restriping of South Willamette or emergency preparedness, new bus routes, Sunday streets, legal options for homeless camping. We're getting the word out about these activities of the city, and many of these articles are contributed by city staff. So at this time last year, I reported that we had formed a communications committee with NLC to look at cost savings in neighborhood outreach, and we did research many ideas, getting cheaper per price printing through multi-neighborhood newsletters. We looked at getting nonprofit postage rates versus the city's standard mail rate. We even looked at having Springfield Public Schools do our printing and mailing for us, because they're one of the cheapest printers around. And we also pondered, could we get each neighborhood to appoint an ad sales executive from within their ranks to take advantage of the recent lifting of the ban on advertising? But in the end, a couple of these ideas might work for several neighborhoods, or they're working now. But all are currently impractical for a citywide solution across our very diverse neighborhoods, or these things we researched just reached a dead end.
Thank you. Carlos Barrera, followed by Harvey Loonstein.
I'm Carlos Barrera. I live at 2470 Olive Street in Ward 1. I'm also on the steering committee for community emergency response teams, and am the community emergency response team lead for the southeast quadrant of the city. I'm here not so much to ask about funding. I know that there's some funding on the table for emergency management. I'm looking for support, hopefully from the city council and the city manager in particular, to give direction to Public Works and to eWeb to work in cooperation with us so that we can develop the protocols and procedures so that we can serve as an adjunct to those people's services in the event of a major disaster, such as the major earthquake that's predicted to occur sometime in the not-too-distant future. Right now, the Springfield Eugene Fire Department has seen the value that we can provide to them. 2 months ago, we had our first joint drill, and in which we acted in support of them so that they could get out there and do their work. I believe that in the event of a major earthquake, that CERT field teams, one of the primary jobs would be to get out there and fight small fires to prevent them from becoming conflagrations, and then also to work on clearing streets so that fire trucks and ambulances can get through to where they're needed. To be able to do that, we need a certain amount of training. And we think that Public Works is one of the major areas where we can get the training we need so that we can safely clear trees out of the streets. And eWeb would be the one to provide us with more knowledge about how to deal with their wires, which will likely be in the streets as well. If we need to, we'll cut those wires so that fire trucks and ambulances can get through and save people's lives. But we could certainly use some direction. Thank you.
Harvey Bloomstein, followed by John Belcher.
Good evening. My name is Harvey Bluestein. I'm the chair of the Eugene Kathmandu Sister City Association. We have been Sister City since 1975, and I won't go into the history, but over the past year, the association has raised $32,000 for earthquake relief. We were instrumental in getting the University of Oregon to dedicate a $30,000 scholarship for a Nepalese student, which has just been awarded. We have picnics, we have cultural affairs, and the Eugene Kathmandu Sister City Association is alive and well. I was there in Kathmandu last month, and our counterparts had two desires. One was to dedicate a bronze statue of Manjushri, a deity associated with the founding of Kathmandu, to the new city hall. And their second desire was to send a delegation here next year to study Eugene's parks and green spaces, because anyone who's been to Kathmandu knows they really need that kind of assistance. So I'm requesting that our budget be increased from $2,500 to $5,000 so that we can do the delegation in style. We could, of course, feast them at Carl's Jr., but that would be churlish. We really want to do it right. Last year, you all made a commitment to Kathmandu by donating $50,000 for earthquake relief. I'm asking you today to add $2,500 as a recommitment to our association with Kathmandu. Thank you.
John Belcher, followed by Vic Harton.
Hello, my name is John Belcher. I'm co-chair of the River Road Community Organization. Thank you for your prior discussions and about restoring and possibly increasing the neighborhood services budget for communications and matching grants. Some of you may be wondering why these funds should be restored when staffers reported that they haven't been exhausted this year. Let me try to explain. Communication funds. The fiscal year still has a month and a half to go. There are likely to be additional requests for more publications before June 30th. At least one neighborhood reports that there isn't sufficient funding to print and mail another publication, but they still have $800 in their account. That would be left on the table. My neighborhood association, River Road, is only funded for about 32% of our costs of publication because that's the percentage of citizens we have in our neighborhood. So we have to draw down from sewer funds that are left over from the 90s sewer war transition funds, and we're loath to do that because if we do two postcards a year, we'll run out of that money in 3 to 4 years. So we don't use all of our allocation. There are other neighborhoods, some neighborhood associations remain strong from year to year, but others wax and wane for various reasons, which include loss of leadership and energy fading once contentious issues are resolved. If we cut the budget because they're not publishing, there'll be no funding to help them get the word out when they begin the challenging task of rebuilding. Neighborhood matching grants. This year there were more applications than there was funding available. Unfortunately, it was determined that many of these applications weren't sufficiently developed to receive grants, even though their outcomes were worthy of being approved. Those projects and more are likely to be refined and resubmitted for funding this next year. It would be a shame if that funding wasn't available. Restoring both services would cost 0.03% of the city's general fund operating budget. And if those funds aren't spent, they don't disappear. They go right back into the city's working capital. So for these reasons, I request that a minimum you restore the $55,000 to the neighborhood services budget and that you recommend to the city manager that he direct HNRI to work with the neighborhood associations to find ways to better utilize those funds. Thank you.
Vic Harleton, followed by Bonnie McCormick.
Hi, thank you all. My name is Vic Harrington. I'm the chair of Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association, also known as SHENA. I'm also co-chair of the Council of South Eugene Neighborhoods. I'm here to request additional funding, not just the $55K for the neighborhood associations. The $55K, even $60K, I think is going to be way too short. I was just doing some quick math this afternoon. I think we need a 72% increase. The postcards for Sheena, we've sent out 3 postcards and 1 newsletter. We're sending out 1 more postcard, which puts us $200 in the hole. The Sheena board has decided, let's go ahead and take the money out because communication is so important. Oregon Consensus has told everybody how communication is needed, how much it's needed for trust. And what we're doing is we're shorting the process. Neighborhood associations have a very important job of communicating with neighbors, and we cannot do that. And unfortunately, email is not being used by neighbors, and you can't force that. However, the newsletters are the best option. And we would love to be able to send at least 4 newsletter and maybe 4 postcards a year. And at $1.64 a home for newsletters, and $1.08 per home for postcards, that's $2.72 per home to do a mailing of 1 of each. And now we're talking, versus the $1.58 per household per year. So we need something better. And what I'd like to do is ask that you make this an ongoing expense. I think that's what I had heard on one of the news clips that you all had. And so we don't have to go through this each year. But I'm thinking that we're looking at a budget closer to $100K, not $60K, based on the numbers I was coming up with. We need to do a proper job for neighborhood associations, more importantly for the neighbors.
Thank you. Bonnie McCormick, and followed by Mike Caven.
My name's Bonnie Bettman McCornack, and I live in Ward 1. So transparency and accountability are being minimized along with the budget information and process with this administration. The last year that I was on the budget committee, this was the proposed budget. This was the adopted budget, and this is now the budget. The 4J budget is $379 million plus, and that's $100 million less than this budget, and it's 363 pages with a lot of detail. The Salem budget is 512 pages combined, and since January 13th up until May 11th, they had 6 meetings. Oversight of the city budget on behalf of taxpayers is not micromanaging. It's why you are elected or appointed to your positions. It is supposed to be the primary job you perform. The public would like to believe that you have our backs. When there are no drastic cuts in the offing, it's easy to be complacent. At your last meeting, you adjourned a half hour early, yet there were lots of unasked questions and topics left out, like City Hall, a major capital expenditure, very controversial. What happens in 5 years to the 18.5 FTEs when the library levy expires? Is that meant to be a repeated levy? Are those people going to be fired? Are those going to be new hires, or are they going to be transfers? How will a new refinement plan and implementing zoning ordinance for the South Willamette Zone be paid for? What about the Urban Renewal District Amendment and its impact on the general fund? And why isn't anybody looking at alternative sources of funding? And there was one other thing about funding. Why the stormwater fees went up again this year, 7.5%. Why aren't you looking at alternatives to increasing stormwater fees?
Mike Caven, followed by Heather Saliki.
My name is Mike Caven. I'm from Cottage Grove, and I'm the president of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 851. I'm here before you today to ask this committee, as you find availability in the budget for some one-time fundings, to allocate $500,000 to the fire department to support innovation in basic life support ambulance transport. The fire department has suffered significant increases in service demand without the ability to match resources as we struggled through the recession. In the last 10 years, our service demands have gone up over 20%, and in the last year alone, it's been 11%. This innovation is a cost-effective way to get more resources on the street in a time when we need it the most. We run out of ambulances nearly daily. We're shutting down fire companies almost daily, 315 times last year alone. That leaves those neighborhoods vulnerable when those fire companies are shut down for fires and other emergency medical events. This request comes as on the back of a proposal from the union to establish this basic life support with apprentice-type positions, which are an entry point into the organization, lower pay, which allows us to get those resources at a better cost. Ultimately, if the Budget Committee cannot find the initial request that would fund this program, allow the fire department to see it play out and evaluate it effectively, a request of up to $150,000 would be warranted to help fund the training, the uniforms, and allow a smooth transition between shutting down the resource that will be shut down to fund the program as proposed and getting the BLS units actually active. And so this is money that also would come back into the budget at the end of FY17 as those revenues from that ambulance transport starts to come into the cities.
Thank you. Heather Saliki, followed by David Monk.
So my name is Heather Salicki, but I'm not actually talking to you under this hat today. If I was, I would ask for dedicated funding for the Community Emergency Response Team Outreach Coordinator, which we desperately need. But today I'm here as a Southeast neighbor. I'm the chair. I started out as secretary, and I've been the chair now for about 4 years. I volunteer about 1,000 hours annually in this capacity. Our neighborhood has about 12,000 residents, roughly 7% of the city of Eugene. Providing timely and relevant communication to our community is is an essential function for our organization. We also provide information to people through meetings we have. When supported, neighborhood associations can be the gateway to democracy and informed citizenry, encouraging responsibility and action. We provide a website, we have Facebook, we have e-newsletter, we have the printed postcards and newsletter, but I think we have a wide range of beliefs in play about the function and capacity of newsletters, of neighborhood associations right now. In 2012, we had a budget of $12,000, mostly restricted to publications, subsidized city printing, dedicated city staff. Now in 2016, we have a $7,000 budget. Our flyer costs have quadrupled. We can't access the city print shop. We don't have any oversight on our communications. We exhausted our budget on February after sending out 2 newsletters and a postcard. And so as a result, we can't send out information since February about South Willamette Special Area Zone, including recent developments, a candidate forum we hosted, and Kitty Piercy's one coming up in June. We can't provide information about our neighborhood disaster planning efforts, even though we're the first neighborhood in the city's history to actually come up with a disaster plan to implement. We can't talk about our Adopt a Park program. We couldn't even advertise our neighborhood elections. We can't talk about our neighborhood picnic planning, which has gone from 30 people annually to 300 different neighbors. We can't talk about the street restriping, the almost 16,000 pounds we collected in the electronics collection drive through our neighborhood schools. We can't promote our vulnerable populations working group. We couldn't advertise a key training. We can't talk about the TSP, Arley Park, MX, LC. There's a lot more I could say, but just tell me, we need the funding badly.
Thank you. David Monk, followed by Leonard Epstein. Sorry, Leonard Epstein.
My name is David Monk. I'm a Ward 2 resident. I want to thank you all for your service to the city. I think your job, the Budget Committee, is hard enough as it is with minimal information you have. I would encourage you to require staff to give you more detailed information about the budget. It's a difficult job you have to do. So that additional information, I think, would help you immensely. Secondly, I think your meetings would be better served in your ability to check back on what was said if you engaged a stenographer at your meetings. I think you would have a verbatim record of your discussions. I think that would also assist you immensely. I heard the information about the newsletter, about the neighborhood funding, and I would totally agree that the funding as it has been inadequate, and as you can see, it's a great investment. The money that you're giving to neighborhoods is well spent, so I really encourage you to try to find as much money in your budget for that as possible. The last thing I was going through the budget, and the Urban Renewal District is getting close to, it seems to me, according to the document, getting very close to paying off the bonds. And as I read the last page of the Urban Renewal budget document, it seems to me that you have the money to pay off the bonds. And that, I believe there's $500,000 that was earmarked for the farmers market, and that money hasn't been spent. You're talking about borrowing more money for that purpose. So I think you need to pay off those bonds, to notify the county of having done so, and in all likelihood you should terminate the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Leonard Epstein, followed by Janet Bevitt.
Hi, Leonard Epstein from Ward's Hill. As a member of the Board of Southeast Neighbors, I would first like to thank the city for the support, both financial and consultative, it has provided neighborhood associations. We should give you a thank you. We have a very good working relationship with the city and are constantly trying to make Eugene the best possible place to live and work. I think it's important to remember that neighborhood associations are staffed by volunteers. I, for example, advocate for citizens in 4 neighborhoods as a member of the Council of South Eugene Neighborhoods, work as a liaison with the City Parks Department. In the last few weeks, I and another person planted 108 perennial plants in Tugman Park. We have a commitment to water those for 2 years. I work with other Southeast Neighbors board members to prepare and host an annual neighborhood picnic for several hundred people every year, and have developed and implemented a neighborhood survey. But most importantly, to get things done and to inform the citizens of Eugene, the neighborhood associations especially depend upon the city for financial support, to keep the matching grant program viable, and to print and deliver newsletters and postcards to neighbors on a regular basis. Neighborhood associations work tirelessly to keep residents informed and actively involved in matters that are relevant to their community, including those pertaining to health and safety, volunteer opportunities to make the neighborhood better, and educational forums. I hope the Budget Committee will consider restoring funding cuts to Eugene's neighborhood associations and also seriously consider Vic Harton's and Heather Salicki's comments to increase funding. We are an excellent investment in a healthy and vibrant Eugene. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Janet Bevitt, followed by Pamela Miller.
Janet Bavert. I live in Ward 2, Sheena, and have property in Southeast. So I have a question. Do you support funding the neighborhood associations so they can at least do their mailing newsletters and possibly more? Does defunding seem like the city wants less input from the neighborhoods and to remove the rights of the community and people to be heard? The city mayor, the city council, planners, and budget committee members say they support the neighborhood associations and community, but budget cuts are not supportive. Do you support MUPTI, a 10-year tax exemption for developers that assists their investors and make larger profits quicker? And at what cost? Does the city want more money in their budget? Are city property owners property tax increases of up to 3% a year, subsidizing the city's lost revenue from the MUPTI program? The city of Eugene needs tax dollars for their budget. This money could help the neighborhood associations' need for appropriate funding to reach the community, plus so much more. It's unfair that most property owners could have an annual tax increase and get no tax exemptions. I'd love to have 10 years of tax exemptions. Please figure out what your prior year's tax statement savings would be at the Lane County Property Account Information website. The city needs added financing, not less, and well-planned development to keep it attractive and functioning. That is true sustainability and livability. You say communication and openness is key, and with more transparency, so please reveal your values through your voting track record to support a decent neighborhood association budget and to not support MUPTI's tax exemptions for wealthy developers and investors. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Miller, followed by Morgan Greenwood.
Good evening. My name is Pamela Miller. I reside in Ward 3, Eugene, in the SUNA neighborhood. And I'm here to comment on the proposed defunding of neighborhood organization newsletter publication and mailing and the matching grants program. Neighborhood organizations are a viable and vital conduit for the sharing of information that can support informed civic involvement. They also facilitate the strengthening of connections between residents within the neighborhoods. The benefits of such connections are many: enhanced neighborhood safety, the potential for improving emergency response effectiveness, the initiation of neighborhood improvement projects, and promoting social interactions which increase residents' sense of neighborhood identity and community. I'm at a loss to understand what the logic might be for hamstringing a long-established and effective network of neighborhood organizations to which dedicated volunteers contribute hundreds, if not thousands, of in-kind hours each year. These organizations have value for both residents and their city government. They intrinsically support the much-touted Envision Eugene neighborhood livability pillar. I urge you to demonstrate the city's long-standing commitment to the neighborhood association citizen engagement model by restoring this funding, which supports communication and innovative initiatives for neighborhood improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Morgan Greenwood, followed by Candace Chirac.
Good evening. My name is Morgan Greenwood. I'm a co-chair of the Friendly Area Neighborhood Association and a resident of Ward 2. I'd like to share a statement prepared by my co-chair, Josh Newman, on behalf of the FAN Executive Board. We're requesting a restoration of at least $55,000 to cover the newsletter publication and at least 4 mailings a year, as well as the matching grants program that are currently absent in fiscal year 17 City of Eugene budget. In the opening pages of the 2014 Neighborhood Handbook, Mayor Piercy wrote, "Since they were formed in 1976, Eugene's neighborhood associations have been vital partners in addressing issues that affect our community. Neighborhood associations provide a grassroots democratic forum for residents to participate in civic affairs and are important to furthering the council's vision of effective, accountable municipal government. From public safety to land use, sustainability to parks and open spaces, our neighborhood associations shape how Eugene works for all of us. In order to provide a grassroots democratic forum for residents to participate and to further the council's vision, neighborhood associations absolutely need the newsletter and matching grant funding restored. Furthermore, restoration of these funds will be a smart investment of taxpayer dollars that will pay dividends in the form of volunteer effort that enhances and offsets countless hours of city staff time. In order to promote and attract a diverse range of participation, outreach is essential. Without it, neighborhood associations can slip into a homogeneity of involvement that tends to further inhibit diversity in a vicious cycle. The FAN is no different from other neighborhood associations in this regard, and we struggle to attract young people, minorities, renters, and lower-income community members to be involved. We need all the outreach tools at our disposal in order to effectively support diversity. The FAN newsletter and associated FAN meetings are an effective two-step strategy for public engagement on major plans and projects. The FAN newsletter itself reaches approximately 3,500 households, and the newsletter almost always features articles written by City of Eugene staff on important planning and street projects, as well as emergency preparedness. In many cases, these newsletter articles are followed by a staff presentation at following FAN general membership meetings, where residents... Thank you.
Candace Schrack. She spoke. Okay. All right, that concludes our public comment period. We'll move into the next couple of items on our agenda. First, I wanted to start by actually thanking Laura as she stands up and...
Oh, sorry.
catch her off guard. I realize we didn't do that last meeting, but Laura's been our chair for the past, 3 or 4 years? I think
a while, yes.
4 years, and I just wanted to thank her for all of her service to this committee and her leadership.
Thank you.
So in your packet, there are minutes from the May 11th meeting. You should have all received those. Are there any recommended changes or comments from that? Betty?
First, we usually get a chance to comment on the public comment.
Oh, okay. We'll do that now. Thank you for bringing that up. Would anyone like to comment on the public comment? Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. We've heard from 2 groups who have done a lot of work for the city without adequate support. The neighborhood groups and the sister cities. And I'm sure there are others, but they've done a lot of volunteer work. They're both things, they're commitments that we have that we're not fulfilling. And as far as the neighborhoods are concerned, I've seen neighborhoods, I've been on council almost 20 years now, and I've seen neighborhoods almost die, and when we've defunded and refunded sometimes, and when they have enough funds to do newsletters, I've seen them blossom and change in a short time because they know what's going on. They know that the neighborhood is there. I think that's crucially important. I think it's an obligation. Sister cities, these are commitments that were made by previous councils to 4 cities in Russia, Korea, Japan, and Nepal. And all of those sister cities consider the relationship very important. And I think that we should too. Some people said, I've been to Nepal and to Russia, but when I went to Russia, some people said, what are we getting out of that? And I thought, that's not the point, what we're getting out of it. I do think we get a lot out of it. We get a lot, we learn a lot. And it's a good example for the younger generation in the community. But we also give something that's very important to people. When I was in Kathmandu, we were on the front page of the newspaper 2 days straight, and they had big dinners for us. They didn't just give us a potluck or a meal at wherever somebody mentioned here, but it was a big celebration. And I think I've heard a lot of talk about people who are coming here in 21 for a short time. Well, these, and this is, I think, is much more important, these relationships we've had for many years. I think when you say it's a sister city, it's a commitment. It's not just a sister is for lifetime. And I think that we should be giving a lot more money. I think both groups are asking for too little. And I think we should increase it. But I want to thank all the people who came to talk about those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Will, and then Councilor Evans.
So I echo Betty's statements there. I have a couple of clarifying questions that the city staff can hopefully answer. Several of the sister city groups were talking about an increase from 2,500 to 5,000. Was that a per sister city or overall in the budget, or that's so we're looking at 2,500 times 4. Is that what we're doing? Okay. And so if I understand correctly, as far as the neighborhood outreach goes, we have an amount in the budget, and then that's divided out on a per capita basis for each neighborhood. And then if it's unused, it remains in the working capital, which is then used next year. Is that
right? What happens is if the money isn't used, then it drops back into fund balance that can be reappropriated through this process the next year.
So if we were to increase the funding beyond, if we were to say do 75,000 or something, and it didn't get used, we would see it again. And if it did get used, oh darn, we've managed to communicate well with our neighborhoods.
Right, whatever is not used in the budget goes back into fund balance, and that gets reappropriated however this body chooses to recommend that. That's true.
Okay. I think I'll leave the remainder of my comments for when we actually do motion discussion.
Councilor Evans.
Well, I would like to, again, echo Councilor Taylor's comments about the neighborhood associations, because in my neck of the woods in Bethel, ABC is struggling to stay alive. And right now, we're on hiatus in terms of a neighborhood association. And communications is important and critical, and we've struggled with that for a number of years. But one of the other key components of what's going on is the growth of the city has not, or the neighborhood associations have not kept pace necessarily with the overall growth of the city. So I give you the fact that Bethel is basically, instead of being one community organization, has morphed out into basically 4 distinct neighborhoods that need to have the kind of attention and the communication lines and the governance infrastructure that does not exist. So we have got to find different ways of supporting our neighborhood associations, yes, with dollars and with budget resources to do that, but also rethinking how we look at the distinct way that our neighborhoods are growing and evolving, and that we reflect that growth with a commensurate dedication of staff time and resources where we can, so that we can help our communications as well. I also think that we should be looking at bringing back the Citizen Involvement Committee. I think that's an important element. I served on that committee 25 years ago, and I think that's an important element that really needs to be looked at in terms of bringing that back. So I think I'm out of my time, and I'll stop there.
Josh, and then Jill.
Actually, that's a perfect segue from what Councilor Evans just said. I asked last time about understanding the money that we spend on neighborhood associations and helping them communicate in the broader context of communication, especially by staff working on projects in the community, especially planning projects. So I think it'd be helpful to, I'm not exactly sure how to figure this out, but I think we either need to hear more on the shape of that and the efforts that planning staff are pursuing. or we need to go back to the drawing board and think about other support for this, because we've had some recent failures and we need to figure out how we're going to move forward better. So supporting the funding this year, I'm totally in favor of that, but there's clearly a bigger picture we need to return to. A clarification, there was a description from the firefighters, Mike Cabin from the firefighters, for some proposal or set of proposals. Was there a document that was circulated, or have we seen that, or did just city staff? Okay, so it'd be nice to get some detail on that, just so we're not getting it in just 2 minutes.
What I should say is that's a relatively new idea and proposal. We're very supportive of exploring that, both with the union and internally. It may turn out to be actually a really good idea, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done before it really is a proposal that we'd want to bring forward to the council or the budget committee. So it's really in a very early genesis stages.
Too early to show up in this budget process, or what?
I really think so, because there just isn't enough information that we've had a chance to work with all parties to really figure it out yet.
Okay. All right. But then I guess I would just say it'd be helpful to hear from the firefighters, to hear more on that, just going forward. And then last, I was particularly struck by Peter Knox's comments from Downtown Neighbors Association. There's clearly a breakdown if we don't have sufficient funding for neighborhood associations to communicate about major initiatives like doing all the public engagement related to MUPD. If we have funds that are unspent, then we also have an extra broken mechanism where we're not able to redeploy to support ordinances that council has passed. So I would ask for comments on how we can be flexible in those situations. I'll leave it at that for now.
Jill, and then Councilor Pryor.
For the city staff, my question is, there is a statutory or policy reason why the neighborhood associations can't retain the funds from the prior year that was allocated to them?
So the funds are allocated by population of each neighborhood association, and the guidance for neighborhoods was approved by council a number of years ago, and so we follow those guidelines. They don't actually speak to whether or not funds can carry over, but as an organization, our practice is that unspent funds go back to marginal beginning working capital and back to the general fund for redistribution.
Okay. So my thought is, it sounds to me like from the considered comment of the public tonight on this subject, that part of the problem is they can send out another postcard or newsletter, but they don't have enough money to send the whole one out. So it seems to me that unless you perfectly allocate the funds, then there's no way they're going to have unused funds. And if those have to go back, so my thought is, I don't know if that's even a subject for the budget committee, but perhaps some policy could be adopted by council, whereas if you have an active association that is actually sent out X numbers of mailers, or whatever the criteria the council would create, they can retain their funds, and that way they can just build on it and then actually figure out what these things cost, and then they'll have enough. They could save some money and then plan another mailing for a future year. So maybe that would help. I'm not saying in lieu of an increase, but I'm just saying money wouldn't just be flushed down the toilet at the end of every year because you just don't have enough to send it out to everybody. So I don't know. Is that a council decision then? Would that?
You want to say something?
Yes. So prior to the one-time funds being allocated last budget cycle, the neighborhood leaders started a conversation about potentially looking at the calculation for neighborhoods and the way that funds are distributed, so that the neighborhoods that use all of their funds could potentially access others, or there's another system in place. Sure. And once the budget committee made clear they were going to restore funding, that conversation sort of was tabled. But staff have started that conversation with the group at one point, so we could revisit that.
Great. Good. Thank you.
Councilor Pryor, and then Scott.
Yeah, great comments, and just we're actually doing a little bit of a preview of the deliberations, so I think it's okay. And what I'm hearing from everybody is that during those deliberations, there's going to be a lot of interest in restoring that funding. So I think neighborhoods can kind of feel comfortable and confident that there will be a restoration of funding. But that's really kind of the first step. There's also things about what can we do to ensure flexibility within that funding, what can we do to ensure that that fund is able to be used effectively within the neighborhoods to not only stimulate increased communication, but also the ability to provide information on important things that are going on. So I think that's all great, and figuring out a way to make that ongoing I think is also going to be important, because as I mentioned last week, I'm also interested, and I know we don't have the ability to do it in this budget, but I think we've got a year to think about what are the monetary implications of actually creating an even larger engagement process for the city, of which neighborhood communication is just one piece. Communication is nice, communication is great, it's important for neighborhoods, but it's not the same as true engagement, and that costs money. And I think if we really want to be responsive to the community, we got to go that extra step. So I'm not even going to propose we talk about it in this budget cycle, because we don't even know what it would look like yet. But what I'm doing is previewing for next year's budget. The communication piece I think is important. We're going to reaffirm it here, and that'll go forward. And then I think we need to start talking about what the increased community and neighborhood engagement process looks like for next year's budget, because I think there's going to be a budget implication there, and it's going to make $50,000 for communication look fairly low. But I want to do it thoughtfully and create something in time for next budget. But that's my preview for what I have a very high interest in from a communication and engagement standpoint.
Scott and then Laura.
Thank you. Thanks for the public comments there. I have a couple questions regarding some of the comments. The first is the neighborhood funding. Was the $55,000 based off of any kind of set number of mailings per period, or what was that number arrived at? How was that determined?
Just hang out up here. Yeah, sorry, I should have introduced myself last time. I'm Mia Carriaga from the city manager's office. The $55,000 restored funding to the previous fiscal year level of 115.
And then with the sister cities, the reduction to 2,500, how long have they been funded at 2,500? And
this is the second. This would be the second fiscal year.
Okay.
In which they've been funded.
Okay, and then on the comment from the firefighters, I know that there was talk about the Cahoots van and the 24/7. With their request, that capability also might be something that we would want to hear about if we're talking about adding capability to the Cahoots van with the 24/7 from our last meeting. So those two capabilities might be very similar in nature or offer expanded capabilities.
Laura and then Councilor Brown.
So I just want to very briefly comment on three things. So I want to thank everybody who came to speak tonight. It's always valuable to hear where the community is and where passion and energy reside in terms of what's important to people who live here. Some of the programs we've heard about tonight, both sister cities and neighborhood associations for sure, are places that the city gains enormous leverage, I think, from the volunteer hours that people around the community put in. And when I listen to the comments and see all the things that neighborhoods are doing and think about those hours and the relatively small amount of money that these neighborhood communications cost, it seems sort of like a no-brainer to make sure that those things are funded and that we continue to leverage all the volunteer hours that people are putting in. In the same way, Sister Cities program, if we're talking about $10,000 to foster peace and communication in an increasingly globalized world and sell more full city coffee and do all kinds of good things. And again, leverage volunteers who are doing lots of work. $10,000 in the grand scheme of a budget the size of the cities seems, again, to me like a little bit of a no-brainer. And then the final thing I'll say, I did appreciate the comments about the budget and sort of the detail and the size and the time that we're putting forward. I'm not a believer that the number of pages always reflects, more pages isn't always better in my mind. However, I do think that with the complexity of the budgets that come before us, we may need more time than we're allocating right now, especially when we have things that come forward like this firefighter proposal, which is brand new information. We don't have have a background on it. I know there's questions we put forward for the staff. They have to go out and do research to make sure we have the information to evaluate the things before us. And so I would say I think it's worth at least considering whether or not we have enough time in the process to fully evaluate what's before us. Thanks.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the Sister Cities program, please. We have to restore that on a permanent basis and stop having this happen every year or every other year. Same for the neighborhood funding. $55,000 isn't enough. We've already heard that. We already know that the active neighborhoods run out of money before they've done 4 mailings a year. So I think we should bump that up to $75,000. Let me make that amendment when there's already a motion out there that was tabled, at least, and see how that goes. It's true, neighborhoods, they fluctuate. Councilor Evans was talking about active Bethel. I went to a few meetings out there when I first got on council about 8 years ago, and it was active Bethel citizens. They were well attended. The people were actively involved in issues, and things changed though. Far West neighbors are that way. They're kind of dormant now, but they'll come back. I mean, things ebb and flow. They'll come back, but they won't be able to if they don't have any money to mail notices to people, the group that starts it back up again. So this is another conversation we have to stop having every year, too. This has to be on a permanent basis, and the amount of money is relatively, it's just trivial in both cases, the sister cities and the neighborhood thing. So that should be restored and bumped up and made permanent, until the next worldwide economic dislocation. That's going to happen again sometime. We don't know when. So it's as inevitable as the earthquake. We have no idea when that will happen, and we'll be having, different discussions at this budget committee. But for now, things are looking pretty good, and so we need to restore both of these and stop having the same discussion every year and talk about other things. Thank you.
Mayor Piercy.
I was just going to suggest that you keep kind of not the list just for the Budget Committee now, but the list of things the Budget Committee would like the city to address over the next year, so that can go back to council to follow up on, which is a different list than the one you're sort of working through here. I think that would be very helpful, because as we look out into our plans for the next year, as you look out into your plans for the next year, you can look at what you've been asked to do by this budget committee so that we don't keep having these same conversations over and over again.
Great. Well, thank you everyone who came for public comment. Now we'll move on to the next items on the agenda. Thanks, Councilor Taylor, for setting me straight. In your packet, there are minutes I mentioned before. Does anyone have any recommended changes or comments? No? All right, then we need a motion to approve.
Move we approve minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hand and keep it there for a moment so we can get a good count. All right, any opposed? None opposed. All right, so next we're going to move into some presentations from city staff, and first up we have Human Services, and I'll let staff.
I'm going to jump in. Hi, I'm Sarah Maderi. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I'm just providing kind of a welcome introduction to this conversation about human services. And this is one where when we talk about human services, both at this committee and also in the organization, I think a lot of us think about different parts of the budget and different parts of the organization, and I can say from a city staff perspective, most of our staff feel like there's some component of what they're doing that is human services. So tonight what we're going to do is kind of take a quick tour through what has been sort of more traditionally considered our human service investments, and then we're going to introduce a couple of new areas we're exploring. This isn't in any ways all-inclusive of all the things we do, from even just having community centers open on really cold days. There's a lot of ways in which we're investing tax dollars into human services. So with that, I'm going to just first introduce Stephanie Jennings, who works in community development as our grants manager, and she's going to do the first piece, and then we'll kind of segue on.
Good evening. So I'm going to walk through the city's use of federal funds to support human services as well as our affordable housing programs, which include federal funds as well as city contributions. So just briefly, as a brief overview, this body is very familiar with the use of general funds that are provided to the Human Services Commission for support of human services. In addition, the city provides $350,000 a year in CDBG funds to also support human service operations. These funds are directed to core agencies such as day access centers for people experiencing homelessness, to special needs populations, also for crisis housing for victims of domestic violence, as well as access to food. Another set of investments that I'll go into more detail in just a moment is our Human Service Capital Investments Program. And this is a program where the city really provides a leadership role in the community in terms of helping to create capital facilities that are appropriate places to provide human services. Affordable housing is a critical complement to human services. When you talk to human service agencies in the community, the most significant issue their clients face is access to decent, safe, affordable housing. And as access complements human services, it makes those human services more effective, and it also prevents the need for human services in many cases. So I want to talk a little bit about the impact of the Capital Facilities Program. The overall goal of this program is to preserve and expand the physical capacity for human services, emergency, and transitional housing. This is a program that has been in place for a very long time. It has been supported through the Community Development Block Grant Program. In addition to creating suitable places for providing human services, it also reduces the energy and maintenance costs, which then allows these organizations to redirect those resources to the support of the human service operations. Last year, the City Council set a goal through the Eugene Springfield Consolidated Plan of supporting investments in 15 facilities in Eugene over a 5-year period. The facility pictured here is the Lindholm Center, also known as the Eugene Service Station for homeless single adults. And we've used CDBG funds multiple times to expand the capacity of this facility, and work is underway right now to expand the bathroom facilities, shower facilities, and laundry facilities at this location. Most recently, Council took action on April 25th to allocate just over $1 million in CDBG funds to support several additional human service capital facility projects that were identified through an open RFP process. I want to talk a little bit about the impact of affordable housing developments. And so there's really kind of a couple types of affordable housing that the city supports. And what we do is we take our federal resources, we couple it with the city contributions, which include the system development charge waivers, as well as the low-income housing tax exemption. I should mention that the city of Eugene is one of the few jurisdictions in the state that offer the SDC waiver and low-income tax exemption programs. And we're the only jurisdiction in Lane County that offer these programs. Together, these resources leverage significant state, federal, and private investments to create thousands of units of affordable housing. So at this point in time, we have over 3,500 units of affordable housing in our community that serve people with limited incomes, people with special needs, and people that have experienced homelessness. The consolidated plan also establishes a goal of creating 650 affordable housing units over the next 5 years. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about rehabilitation programs. The City of Eugene has an aging housing stock. We also have an aging stock of affordable housing. And in order to keep this housing affordable and a quality living environment, we have rehabilitation programs that invest in these and help improve many of these units. Pictured here are 2 projects. The top picture is the Polk Street Apartments located in the Whitaker neighborhood. Using home funds, NEDCO acquired this facility and then rehabilitated it. It now offers 12 units of housing for youth aging out of the foster care system, many of whom who have directly experienced homelessness. The second project, just around the corner from where we sit, is Olive Plaza, which offers 150 units of housing for very low-income seniors in the community. The city provided a $400,000 rehabilitation loan that was coupled with other federal financing programs to extend the life of this facility that has served our community for over 40 years. So with that, I will turn it over.
So I think I was going to also introduce, so that was kind of the more traditional. We're also going to introduce a couple of newer areas we're exploring, and so I'm going to introduce them together. I'm really happy to be joined with Cheryl Stone, who's our court administrator, and our newish downtown Sergeant Julie Smith, who's been kind of leading the downtown patrol team. So they're going to kind of commingle their ideas and presentation, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions.
Good evening. I am going to introduce the community justice concept and then turn it over to Sergeant Smith to talk about the EPD program. In early 2015, the city created a community justice team. This is a cross-department team, including city executives, judges, staff from every city department in the justice system. The vision of the team is to expand tools throughout the system, creating off-ramps for people out of the traditional justice system. So off-ramps that provide other solutions besides citations. This allows us to focus our limited resources where they're most needed and provide better help and solutions for individuals in the community. Our most recent efforts focused in 3 areas. We have a mental health court that we established in 2004. To support this program, the city contributes $50,000 to the Lane County Behavioral Health for services that they provide for mental health court participants. We also have the community outreach response team that Sergeant Smith is going to speak to. And then lastly, I will recap our community court that we are in the process of creating and recently received a grant on. The community justice team continues to meet and provides a great venue for cross-departmental information sharing and decision making.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. And I'm going to talk, whoops, oh, I knew I would mess that up. Okay, what I'm going to talk about is some of the services that we provide outside the criminal justice system that aid in helping us help people. So I want to talk about the CAHOOTS program. It provides crisis intervention. It provides counseling and transportation to the detox service. So we currently, the city has 2 vans that operate, one from 11 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. The second van operates from 3:30 p.m. to 3 a.m. This year, or fiscal year 16, we allocated $562,000 for that service. Coming from Graveyard team, we utilized that service, and when 3 o'clock came around, there was still a line of calls to be that had to be pushed over for the next day. The next service is the Buckley House, is a sobering service. It's designed to provide a safe environment for individuals that are intoxicated, and so that they can have a safe place to be. It operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and the city contributes $79,000 to that service. The court program, which stands for the Community Outreach Response Team, is an initiative that we started this year. It's actually began operating in April, and is a 6-month initiative that we're going to try an alternative method in helping to connect individuals to the services that they need. This allocation of $8,000 pays for a 3rd CAHOOTS van to work with us 1 day a week for 4 hours on Thursdays for this program. So the community outreach program is an initiative that the downtown team has undertaken to reach out to our client base and offer what limited assistance we can outside the criminal justice system. We regularly encounter chronic homeless who often suffer from mental disorders, substance abuse issues, and co-occurring disorders. We also encounter chronically homeless and substance abusing veterans. We have contact with runaways or otherwise endangered youth with dysfunctional family backgrounds. We are striving to increase our ability to provide outreach services to our most chronic contacts. We hope to reach out to this population through a partnership with the mental health professionals, homeless advocates to identify the individual's life circumstances and needs. The court assistance to these individuals will connect them to the proper resources. So there's a core group of clients within the city that utilize many of the services repeatedly. There's a core of about 18 to 20 of them that are repeated calls for service for police. They are repeated calls for service for repeatedly transported to the University District Hospital, calls for service for fire and medics. They are also clients of our municipal court, are oftentimes clients of the jail repeatedly, which altogether, when we started looking at the cost, because they weren't really getting that and addressing their underlying needs, that cost is estimated at about $1 million per person. So the focus of the outreach team is to focus on those core clients so that we can actually address some of their underlying needs and offer the assistance. So the team is comprised of 2 of the downtown officers. Also, the Cahoots staff includes a homeless advocate. It includes a counselor on the Cahoots van, as well as a medic. And then we have access to the new crisis center in Lane County Behavioral Health. So the goal of the court program is if we can help 2 or 3 clients a month over a period of 1 year, that would be 24 to 36 people that we can help off the street. So, the part of the services that we're trying to do is not only address their underlying needs through maybe get them into some long-term substance abuse treatments, but work on getting housing so that they can have a safe environment where they can concentrate on some of those underlying needs. And the goal is to reduce the police services on these chronic clients so that we can offer services to the other people within the community, reduce impact to the criminal justice system, obviously reduce crime statistics. But most importantly, I think the spirit of the program is to assist clients in obtaining the services that they actually need. So this program actually works hand in hand with community court because many of the same clients are going to be clients that we will be servicing in community court.
So as you can see, that's a great first off-ramp, right, out of the traditional justice system, right from the first point of contact with police. So the community courts are a problem-solving court that respond to community concerns about public safety. In 2014, the city administered a community needs assessment survey regarding perceptions of public safety in downtown and in neighborhoods. We received almost 900 responses to this survey, and the survey responses helped guide our work and help form our community court concept. In February of this year, a team of justice system partners traveled to Spokane, Washington to observe their community court, and the pictures that I'll be showing you this evening are pictures of the Spokane community court that we observed. The Spokane Community Court is held downtown in their library 1 day a week. As a participant enters the library, they come through some security and some welcoming volunteers. And then, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, this is the courtroom. It's very informal. It's more welcoming. It's more comfortable for people as they come in. In the lower left-hand corner of that bottom picture is a table where a needs assessment is administered to court participants to determine their risk at reoffending and also their level of needs, different types of service needs. So that individual then gets an individualized case plan. They go speak with their defense attorney and the judge, and they get that finalized. And then there's a warm handoff to a volunteer to take them to the next room where there is a room of service providers available. Each one of those tables represents a service provider in Spokane, from substance abuse to help with Medicaid to ID services, licensing services, a wide variety of services, and they have them right next door. So an individual goes right from one room in the courtroom to the next room where they're connected through a volunteer with a service provider to meet their needs. The court received a $200,000 grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and this, in addition to that, some technical assistance over a 2-year period. The funds fund specific pieces of our program that, for example, an additional FTE to administer the needs assessments and be the case manager for individuals. We are going to hold court here in this room where you sit. We'll have a divider. It'll be 1 day a week here at the library. The library has been gracious enough to partner with us, as well as many other departments in the city, to help make this happen. So we'll have one room that will be a courtroom and another room that will be a service provider room. We'll start with criteria around the block of the LTD area and the downtown library. Those were the areas of highest public safety concern for the community in the feedback that we received. And then we'll be expanding to the downtown patrol area to cover a number of charges. We are talking with service providers. We'll be partnering with them to have a room of service providers similar to the pictures that you saw there. And we will also have downtown community service opportunities. Parks and Open Spaces is partnering with us, as well as some other downtown organizations, so we can have an opportunity to give back to the community. Those community service opportunities will be, Judge Allen likes to speak of them in terms of community integration. So they're service projects that are done with volunteers in the community. So there's relationship building opportunity there for individuals. And then this is a 2-year pilot program, so we will evaluate the program after that, after the 2 years. Community courts in other areas have been successful in reducing crime, reducing the cycle of recidivism, and increasing the capacity of the justice system for higher level offenses. More importantly, they create a better sense of wellness in community members, for community members in crisis.
I think that's the final of the presentation, so we just wanted to be able to open it up to questions. I know that's a lot.
Yeah, so we'll have questions now, and please limit it to just questions and no comments at this point, as we're running a little behind on time, please. So Laura and then Josh.
So thanks very much. The really, really interesting stuff. Thanks. That's great work. I just have a quick question. Can you just talk a little bit more about specifically how you assist youth, homeless youth, or kind of the youth population that may be in need of some of these services that might have different needs or specific needs that are a little different from the adult population?
I can speak from a human service and affordable housing perspective, and so over time the city has provided multiple grants and resources to support human service agencies that work specifically with youth. We've also worked to create affordable housing opportunities that are specifically directed to youth. Looking Glass has been a primary partner in this work, and so and the project that I featured, the Polk Street Apartment, is a partnership between NEDCO and Looking Glass.
That's the aging out of foster care one?
That's the aging out of foster care.
I was talking more about people who were not, I guess, younger than that, who may be on the streets.
Yeah. But they also work with the population that is younger than that as well. And so Station 7 is a facility that is specifically operated by Looking Glass, the New Roads Center. Those receive support through the Human Services Commission, but then they also receive direct support from the City of Eugene through the Capital Facilities Program and other programs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Josh, and then Councilor Brown.
So first of all, thank you. Really incredibly helpful and inspiring presentations. I'm just curious, 2 to 3 people per month might not sound like a lot, but I have this recollection of looking at a police commission packet and seeing that actually the number of, what was your term, highest utilizers, I use that with my kids sometimes, actually. I appreciate that idea. The highest utilizers are actually a really small population, but you didn't put a number on it, or I didn't quite hear it. I mean, I've heard it's like 50, 40, something like that. So just, can you put that in context for us?
Sure. I think there's a list of about 75, but there's about a core 18 to 20 that are actually the highest utilizers, and those are who we're trying to focus on first, so that we can address some of their underlying needs, which may be having them become determined to come in to go to inpatient treatment, housing. It may be taking them to check in for the other programs that they need to report to.
Okay, and just as follow-up, is there any way to put some scale on this in terms of the savings? Because what I saw in the police commission materials was that this was a really surprisingly disproportionate share of total police resources that was going to this small number of people.
Right. The court initiative is a 6-month initiative to reevaluate at the end of October. Since it's a new program, I can't give you the numbers yet and how successful we are. I can tell you that in the 4 weeks, we've had success in getting people in a plan to start to move forward. A lot of times these individuals are stuck in a cycle and don't feel like they can move forward, so then they don't access the services.
I think also we had a conversation about this when we were preparing, and it's very similar to the Housing First model, where when you look at the services that are needed by the group that we're talking about, overall you can kind of start to estimate a pretty high price tag of what those services cost the community and per person. But by providing them and getting them in housing doesn't necessarily mean that that direct amount of dollars frees up that you can reinvest someplace else. But what we anticipate happening, and what I think we're going to see happen, is that overall the whole system has just a little bit more capacity. And we'll be able to measure and understand that, I think, more as time goes on.
Great. Councilor Brown, and then Councilor Surratt.
Thank you. This is a meeting of the Eugene Budget Committee. We're supposed to be discussing the manager's suggested budget, proposed budget. I'm having a really hard time understanding the relevance of this presentation. The council has already had several presentations on the Eugene-Springfield Consolidated Plan. The court project was new, but we were scheduled to have a work session a couple weeks from now, 2 or 3 weeks. I fail to see the relevance with the budget committee deliberations discussing the manager's budget. There's no proposals for changing the budget or adding, it'd be a different matter if you were suggesting, let's add $300,000 in addition to restoring the money to HRC, and let's add more to the court, the municipal court, to deal with this new model, which does look promising. Don't get me wrong. I did enjoy the presentation, but I don't see the relevance. And we're supposed to be talking about the proposed budget. And then I see later we're supposed to have kind of a pep talk about key strategies for the economic prosperity plan. The budget committee cannot create economic prosperity. I just don't. It's taking too much time away from the main thing. We only have 3 budget meetings, and now we're going to spend the greater part of this one talking about things that have no practical link to the budget that we're supposed to be discussing. So I'm just puzzled by this. It just seems like, it's interesting and everything, but it's really wasting the time of the budget committee because there's no proposals linked with it. Thank you.
And part of our proposed budget, there is a a one-time recommendation for $100,000 to actually support the community justice and support this kind of a program. And so that's why we thought it was relevant, is that there is actually a one-time $100,000 ask in the budget.
Okay, I just don't know if it's worth 25 minutes. I mean, that could have been explained in a memo, and I think we have a pretty sharp budget committee here. I think everybody would have grasped that one pretty quickly. Thank you.
Councilor Surratt.
Yeah, I'm sorry that Councilor Brown doesn't see the value of educating the Budget Committee on these matters. We've got a intended motion around restoring HSC money ongoing, and I think it's important for the Budget Committee members who don't get the benefit that we all do on regular updates to get a better picture of what Human Services Commission does, and then there's the line item for the Justice Court. But I was actually had raised my hand originally to just add another little piece of information to Laura's question, which was we also had around services that support youth, we had allocated some funding, some capital funding for Head Start. Is that correct? Speak to that briefly.
This was in that $1 million that Council has directed for the Human Service Capital Facilities Program. So one of the proposals received is from Head Start. We're still in the place where and this is for the Whitaker School, which offers Head Start programs as well as the Whitaker annual community dinner. And we're still in the place where we're refining that scope of work and budget, but the action that Council took created the pool of funding that we can then work with that agency and others to come back with a more specific proposal of exactly how much grant money we would like to propose providing to Head Start.
Councilor Pryor.
Last week we spent a fair amount of time talking about human service funding and the amount that's currently there and what we might want to consider increasing. And part of the conversation was, do we want to consider increasing as a lump sum and just give it to the Human Service Commission and say, go, do good and avoid evil? Or do we want to consider the notion of perhaps doing some of that, but also having money dedicated within the human service area that we might want to be a little more directive around? And if we want to be more directive as a budget committee, then we need to know what kinds of things we might want to be more directive around. And so I think this is helpful to get us an idea of what's Eugene actively involved in that might be relevant to a budget committee that wants to be more directive with its funds. And the example of that is $100,000 for community court. I went to the Chicago conference that they're referencing, and I went to a whole host of different meetings that talked about youth, that talked about drug courts, mental health courts, veteran courts, an enormous system that significantly reduces recidivism and crime, which results in a savings. But more than that, it creates a better quality of life for the people that live in the community. And so I think that is something that we as a budget committee need to think about in terms of, do we want to be directive and say we want to spend $100,000 on this? Do we want to spend, and I've heard some folks say, I want to devote money to this. It's a cahoots van or something like that. Do we want to devote money to public shelter? I mean, that's an issue that's come up. It hasn't come up in this context, but it's part of the discussion about human services. So I think this is helpful. I don't want to spend an enormous amount of time going into background, I agree, but I think we need to know enough about this to know what options we have if we do choose to be more directive with our funding.
So I appreciate the comments, but I just want to note that we have a lot of agenda items to get through. So are there any more questions for staff about this presentation? Councilor Brown.
Isn't it possible that this information could have been sent in a file to the budget committee members, memo, email, rather than take up half an hour of time of the budget committee meeting? I agree with Councilor Surratt. It's really great when any member of any commission can learn more stuff, but if it's kind of peripheral to the main subject under discussion, I think that's better done with memos and emails and PDFs sent. People can kind of bone up at home before they come down to the meeting and know what's going on without taking up half an hour now just on this one subject. Is that a possibility?
I think it's definitely.
Sending information like that?
Always a possibility to send information ahead of time.
Okay.
What we're responding to is the request and the agenda is being set by the chair of the Budget Committee and their work with Central Services. So I think we're trying to be responsive to you and serve you in the way that you're asking. And I know this Human Services conversation came up early last year around we'd like to hear about this next year, and it just seems like it kept being something that people wanted to hear about. So that was the intent. But of course, we can always provide that ahead of time.
Sure, thank you.
Counselor Evans.
Not a question, but I do want to provide a little bit of context to this. What we're talking about with this particular court is an extension of what is going on right now at the federal level with Judge Aiken and drug court, what's happening at the state level with Judge Rookley and her drug court. And this is a way for us not to spend endless resources incarcerating people, but that we have a system of restorative justice where people can avoid having to go through the punitive side of things, and that we can, channel folks, is what we've been talking about, in a more humane way and a more productive way for them to restore their lives. So I think this is an important conversation. This may not necessarily be the place for it at this point, but I think that we do need to have this conversation, and I appreciate the presentation.
All right, I think that concludes this presentation. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break since we're a little bit behind, so please be back by, say, 7 after. We'll get going. questions after the presentation. I'm hearing some people feeling like we really need to get to discussion. So I'd just like to see a quick show of hands. Who would like to have the economic development presentation and who wouldn't? So I'll just do a quick show of hands. If you would like the presentation, please raise your hand.
I don't feel like I have enough data to answer that question.
Yeah.
Yep, Councilor Brown.
Will you repeat the question, please?
If you would like the economic development conversation, I'm just trying to get a quick show of hands of who would like that conversation. If we choose not to have that presentation, the staff will send out as much information as possible about what's going on around economic development via email, and then we'll have a quick presentation from Vicki on some software upgrades, and we'll move right into discussion. So those are the two options. We can have the presentation for economic development, or we can move right to discussion.
Is the presentation on economic development related, again, to a proposal in this budget or anything like that?
Is my understanding it's not related to a particular...
It was much more general, that the budget impacts and vice versa, but it's not a specific recommendation like the other is.
I think we move on.
Given the non-impact to the budget, and that we have a number of community members here who would like to know the outcome of this meeting, I propose that we shuffle it to the end of this meeting or not have it at all, so that we can get to the topics at hand.
So I'm just going to, a quick show of hands. Who would like the presentation? Who would like to skip the presentation and go to a quick presentation about a budget item and then deliberations? All right, so we're going to skip the economic development presentation, and Vicki's going to come present on a quick item.
So I've been asked to join you to talk a little bit about the software upgrade. I believe that Josh asked a question about because it's in the budget. So, oh my gosh, where do I start? We are replacing our corporate software, which is our citywide ERP system. It includes financials, a budget system, and our human resources system. The current software we have was implemented in 1997. And in 2007, there was some instability around the company that owned it. And so at that point, the city decided to go off maintenance, take the savings from that, freeze the system, knowing that we needed to do a replacement. So since 2007, we've been saving money. The current system, as you can imagine, is old. It's been frozen in time. We don't have readily available data. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of care and feeding. There's a lot of customizations and configurations and bolt-ons. So this project is many years long, multiple phases to replace all of those systems with a brand new, updated, modern system that will be fully integrated. So our budget system currently isn't integrated. It's mostly a data transfer. So it'll be fully integrated. We'll be able to get better, more readily available data so that we can report easier and quicker. There will be less care and feeding. Our intention is to keep the customizations down and to a minimum. Our main goal of the project is to maximize our investment in the software to the extent that it meets the city's needs and avoid all of those costly customizations and bolt-ons that need regular care and feeding. Let's see. So we've been saving since 2007, and then along the way, there have been other places where we've found savings in our individual division budgets. So the impact on the general fund in general is not there. It's coming from other places. There's no addition. Do you have more? I can see this question on your face.
Oh, is it that obvious?
Yeah.
Well, no, please finish, but put me in the queue.
So, as you can imagine, since 2007 and 1997, software has changed a lot. The landscape of companies they're understanding that the public sector is becoming more important than it used to be for them. So they're looking at their development is looking at the public sector. So we're excited to get a new budget system that'll be new, and as we move along, we'll be able to set it up the way that we want to go into the future. That is another main goal, is to look at where we want to be, not where we've been, and do what we've been doing. So we've spent many hours looking at our business processes that were built around a system that was implemented in 1997 and frozen in 2007. So lots of pre-work to get us to a new, modern, standard process, and efficiencies are built in there. So that's where the project is.
Okay, any questions for Vicki, Josh, and then Councilor Brown?
Yeah, let me just provide a little bit of context for my inquiry, which might otherwise seem totally decontextualized. So I want our city to be able to pursue good projects. Pursuing good projects requires trust, and we have not always enjoyed that trust, and I believe that having better transparency and oversight will allow us to build that trust that will allow us to pursue good projects. Last year, in our budget committee meetings, I said, hey, how is our budget? How can we see how our budget is making progress or helping us make progress toward major policy objectives that council has laid out over time? And I realized, and you spoke to this last time, the city manager mentioned that we haven't typically asked it that way, but I think actually this is part of the reason that we don't always enjoy trust. So the way this ended up on our agenda is that I had asked why there had been significant increases in the personnel services item in the central services division, in that breakdown in the budget. And this was an extremely large line item. I'd just point out for scale, it was $1.75 million, which, if we were going to spend the equivalent amount of time to what we'd already been discussing tonight, we'd be here until about 2 a.m. But the reason I brought it up is that what I really want to know is, and there may not be an easy answer, and I'm very curious to hear other budget committee members and councilors comment on this. I'd like to know what input we can have, not into the weeds of that, but into it at a high level, so we can say, in order for us to do better oversight of the budget, and in order for us to be able to communicate more effectively with the community, with the budget tools that we have, what's happening to put us on that track? How are we going to spend that $1.75 million so we can do better oversight, build more trust, and do more great projects?
Well, that $1.75 million is just a part of the entire project budget. And what I understand, I'm not involved in the budgeting piece of this project, but I understand that that was part of it. So it's a multi-phased funding also, so we're funding it over several years. We've been funding it for several years. So that line item, or the explanation in the central services change, is really shifting savings in one area to personnel, because we're hiring staff so that we are not working 70 hours a week when we do implementation, and that these folks, the budget folks, can do what they've been doing over this time. We are already spending a lot of time, and so the intention was that we need to have support staff so that people can continue to do their daily operations. That being said, going into the future, I know that from the budget office perspective, they're always listening to feedback on how things are presented and trying to provide better tools for the policymakers to make decisions. And as we move through our business process mapping and improvement and analyzing how we do things, all of this is taken into consideration. I can't give you a very specific thing like, oh, we're going to be able to do this, because what we have now is so far behind what's possible that some of us can't imagine what we could get. So once we move through and see more of the software and go through implementation, we'll be working with consultants who've done this in other agencies and other cities, big and small, and we're listening to them. What are best practices? How are other agencies doing this? What tools do they have? I've been to presentations at conferences, and they've worked very hard with public agencies to do exactly what you're saying, provide transparency and all those things in the reporting. So that's our goal in the project overall, not just to do with the budget.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any?
Councilor Brown, and then Will.
Thank you. So these software upgrades and all the projects that you're working on now, that's pretty much for central services?
For the entire city.
The entire city. Will this improve the city's website? I mean, there's huge problems there.
That's a different system, and we have a project team that works on that regularly.
Well, I'll just tell you that it could be better organized. It's hard to find information.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just me. I hear this from my constituents and other people all the time. There's a problem with, when you try to go to the webcasts of council meetings, there's incompatibility with Macs, a lot of, and that's a huge problem. You can figure it out, but you have to really be a semi-geek to do that, and I'm not. And I have to always have someone show me how to do it just to watch a council meeting. And so, and then when you watch it, sometimes it just cuts off halfway through. So that's one of the reasons that I'm bringing this subject up of rehiring a stenographer for council meetings, so that at least you can go to an accurate written record. And if you're having, until this problem gets fixed, until that site gets, made the way that it should be, and that could be a while. But I mean, have you heard this from other people? I know it's not just me. I hear it from all kinds of people.
So my role in the project that I'm talking about is not involved in the website, for sure.
But I do think, I appreciate you bringing that up, and actually if there are other issues, for sure we want to hear about those, because we have made quite a bit of improvements into the web presence and the website itself. But if there are some specific issues, please let us know, because we do want to address those.
Sure, yeah, no, there's still some I think, major problems. It's just hard for people to access our council meetings, and they might want to know. So, and then there's not, the very abbreviated minutes that we have are meaningless. You can't tell what anyone said or what the argument was, or they're just like these brief half-sentence lines of something, and you have no sense of what went on. So, okay, thank you.
Will and then Councilor Pryor.
So I'm a software nerd, so that's kind of where I'm coming from here. But allow me to paint a picture of what I see as a potential open governance with the new system. Imagine if we could get access on a relatively real-time basis to the public of the city's current spending levels on individual budgets or individual different sections of money in the city's line item. Right now, we have a kind of a once-a-year summary that we are presenting to the public, and there's no reason with the technology as it is today that we can't have a much more real-time picture. Imagine, we were talking today about the money that has been spent by neighborhoods and left over, and whether or not what we should do with it, if it, should it go back to the general fund or not. But imagine if there was a way that we could go into the public website and in real time see how much each neighborhood has been allocated and each neighborhood has spent. I mean, that might sound like a pipe dream, but it's completely not unrealistic with modern software. This is all totally achievable.
Right.
So
this project is, this corporate software is all inward facing. It affects all of our operations. It's not an externally facing system. I know what you're talking about, and there are lots of entities that do that. And we have looked at it occasionally, and it continues to be a topic of discussion. Part of the challenge with those systems is the cleanliness of the data. So perhaps with our new system and having better inputs, more consistent inputs, we could look into something like that would not require a lot of staff time to care and feed that, because you have to cleanse the data to make sure that it's accurate. There's, in any accounting system, there's errors. Something gets coded in the wrong place, it has to get fixed. There's delay in that process. So that's the concern, is to make sure that you have clear and clean data for the public to see, so it makes sense to them.
Your concern is that more transparency will lead to better community oversight?
No, I think what I would say, Will, and I think this dovetails with Josh's question of how does the council and or the budget committee have a conversation on what is the type of information that we would like to be able to show into the community, whether it's at a budget meeting, whether it's real time or whatever that is, when do we get a chance to have that conversation? I think that's a little bit of that question, regardless of what the technology is. The question is if we want to show real time, then let's agree that we want to show real time, and then we'll figure out how to show real time. And so I don't know the best time to have that conversation or when it is or how the council would choose to move forward on that kind of a discussion, but I do think I think that's the question you're asking, is how do we have that conversation about what is that we want to be able to provide, to when and how.
My apologies. You're getting a little bit of my frustration for having only 3 meetings in this calendar year and feeling like we're just kind of only jumping at, we've got this tiny budget and 3 meetings to discuss it. So it's not about you. It's just the process has got me
I have a pretty thick skin.
a little frustrated.
Councilor Pryor.
Yeah, actually, I think Josh raised a very important question, and the quick answer would be the issues you raised are very significant and need to be discussed by the City Council, because it's the relationship between us as a policy body and the goals and priorities that the policy body establishes and how we reflect them by our commitment of money, which is then what flows down to you. And so we really can't give you something that can effectively answer the question, what is the relationship between the money spent and the goals being achieved, if we have not had the conversation about the degree to which we want the money spent to match the goals we've set. I recall when I first got on the council, freshly minted, went to a goal-setting session. This was back when we had them. We haven't had a goal-setting session for a number of years now. And one of the questions I asked was, how do we link our priorities and goals to our budget? And is there a way we can do that? And I think I actually made a motion. It was the first time I lost 7-1 of many. But the point is, it's very difficult for us as a council to make that linkage, because we've tried in past sessions to try to approach that question, and whether we've used buckets, some folks here remember the buckets, to try to figure out a way to link priorities and goals to budget. And unless you do it the right way, it can send an unintentional message about what's important to us and what's not. And so I think at least my impression was the folks were saying, I don't want to have the council look like it's supportive of this and not supportive of that because of the way we spend the money. But how you spend the money is a reflection of that. So that's me taking the long way of saying it is a question the council has to deal with, and not the budget committee. It's a policy question, and the council has to deal with it.
Any other questions for Vicki? All right, thanks.
Well, actually, sorry, final clarifying question. You talking about internally facing versus externally facing systems. Are you saying that the new software is necessarily going to be only internally facing?
It is. It's an ERP system, so it's our citywide corporate system that helps everybody do their jobs internally. It is not an external facing system. It's our finances, our HR, salary management, budget, the budget system where we build the budget. People are crunching numbers. It's transactional.
So just to clarify, this is updating software that was deployed 17 years ago, 18 years ago. So are we then marching down a path where we are necessarily closing off for another most of a generation, the kind of possibility that Will just mentioned? Okay.
No. Well, so again, one of the reasons why the software is so antiquated is that there was a change in owner of the software. Oracle bought it, so at that point we decided to freeze it, and it was very customized. So we haven't been able to update it and keep up with the changes in technology and their development of the system. So with the new system, they have a whole new way of deploying updates. Things have changed drastically, and so I'm already, even though we haven't even hit implementation, I'm already thinking into the future and how we continue to stay on top of improvements and changes, and how we want to transform the organization as we age and get closer to 2025 and a new workforce that has completely different needs.
Yeah. And then final clarification. So then it's possible that the functionality to make this new system externally facing is actually an add-on that we could order later?
Not, well, we haven't completed our purchase. I do not believe that the system that we're looking at has that piece. It's usually something external. There's lots of different platforms that feature is served on. But my feeling is that we will have a better collection of data, more accurate, that we can use so that we can do that external facing piece if that's where the council wants to go. Does that make sense? Yeah. They oftentimes don't do everything. So there's a whole, industry around that external transparency piece.
So then I guess I would just ask, and then this really will be the last clarification. I would just ask if anyone has a suggestion for how we might suggest to councilors who are present whether they want to weigh in by providing some of this prioritization before the final purchase is made in the near future, just so we don't miss a window of opportunity to get some of this additional functionality. I'm just mindful that you don't make this purchase every day.
I don't see it as a part of the scope of this project, and we actually are already, we have an RFP out on the streets for the scope that includes just the ERP system, budget system. But I don't see it as something that couldn't be done in the future. It's just different. It's just would be a different project.
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. All right. Now what we've all been waiting for, deliberations. I just want to point out that we have a little less than an hour left tonight for deliberations. We do have public comments that we're going to hear at the beginning of the next meeting. And I know a lot of us have ideas we want to express, so I want to encourage us to refrain from placing official motions tonight, but do encourage you to talk about your intended motions so that we can get all of our ideas out on the table before we move into those official motions. So at this time, if you would like to be in the queue, let me know. Councilor Brown.
This is about our intended motions?
Yes.
And we're supposed to just speak briefly to them?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I sent email to everybody today about two of my intended motions for next meeting. And one is, I forget the exact figure, I think $215,000 for a Cahoots van, so at least one of the vans would be 24/7. And we heard a little bit in the presentation about the community court. From 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. in the morning, there is no Cahoots van available. And and I spoke with Katie Gillespie. She's the coordinator at Cahoots, and she said that they log off at 3. The bus goes to the barn, they're done. Well, they may have had anywhere from 5 to 8 calls within a half hour before they log off. So, but they can't deal with them. So those are left for the police, fire, EMS, and Sacred Heart's emergency room to deal with. And then it's that way all through the night until 11 o'clock, in the morning. And they will get anywhere from 8, 10 calls a day before 11 o'clock. Well, they can't go respond to them. They have no funding. The van it's not running. And so there's quite a few, and those are just the ones that we know about. And so I know that I'm pretty sure that the police and fire and EMS would be really happy if we could restore that, because then they would be freed up to deal with more, shall we say, serious, possibly violent incidents. And so that's the reason for the request. We had two pretty high-profile cases this year. Brian Babb, who's a veteran with, post-traumatic stress syndrome and some problems, was killed by policemen. Could a Cahoots person de-escalated the situation and maybe had a better outcome? We'll never know. Maybe not, but we'll never know because they weren't available. It happened in the kind of the dead zone of the night. And then there was a serious incident with Eric Richardson's nephew. He could possibly have been killed had his mom not hung on to him for dear life and wouldn't let him go. That was the situation that also happened in this time period. Luckily, there was no death, but, so that's the reason for this. And I'll make that motion at our next meeting. And then the other one is more of an advisory thing. It's asking the Budget Committee to advise the City Council to about hiring a stenographer. Because the Budget Committee, we can't say that's the council and manager's job is to hire, hire personnel. That's not within our purview. But we could strongly suggest it for some of the reasons that I've already mentioned. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Ken and then Councilor Pryor.
At the last Budget Committee meeting, I talked about making wanting to add or increase the city's allocation to the HSC fund by $100,000. I sent out to you all 2 days ago a proposed motion on that, and I'm looking to make that motion. I guess I'll make that motion at the next meeting. I think what I want to say briefly is just to kind of reiterate, I've been on the Budget Committee 5 years. I've been on HSC for 2 years. What I've seen is the city's allocation from the general fund to support ongoing operations of HSC, seen that reduced over the 5 years. Over the last couple of years, it's held pretty steady at $860,000 a year. And what I'm proposing, or what I think we ought to be looking at, is to increase that. I'd like to increase it this year by $100,000. And I would also, the other part of my motion will be to recommend that the council have some discussion in the context of all of the human services funding and expenditures that the city does, which was talked about tonight, have some discussion about increasing that support, that ongoing support allocation back to HSC, increasing it back to a level of the FY11 or FY12 period, which was about 1.1 million. So that's the focus of the motion, and I'll be putting that forward at the next meeting.
Councilor Pryor and then Laura.
Yeah, it'll be great if that could be clarified to know if you're looking at a proposal for ongoing funding and whether there's any directive on that 100,000. Is it 100,000 ongoing money? Be helpful if that can be incorporated. For me, for next week, I think the first thing will be and I'm happy to be the person to do it, to make a motion to remove from the fiscal year 17 proposed budget the $500,000 that's proposed for the 2021 games. Take that money back out. The city manager is recommending backing it out for this budget cycle and putting that money either into a designated reserve or talking about it in terms of one-time funding allocations. Or as bridge funding, maybe to an ongoing conversation. But anyway, I think that's a motion to be made, is to withdraw that money from the proposed budget, either put it in a reserve or talk about it as funding. Then I do think we should talk about restoring the funding for neighborhood newsletters or neighborhood services. And I think my thinking is the amount that might be worth discussing. The minimum is 55. I think we might talk about 60 with a mechanism for providing flexibility within the fund. If somebody needs funds, it could be moved around. And maybe 60 is adequate if you have flexibility within the fund. And let's try that first and see if that doesn't work, because my understanding is some neighborhoods run out of money and some neighborhoods have a leftover, and if that money could be moved around, then 60,000 may be enough to cover what we need to do. If it's not, then next year we could correct it. But this year, with flexibility in 60,000, so I would make a motion to restore that money and make it a permanent restoration, not a one-time funding. Figure out a way to do that.
All right, Laura and then Will.
Thanks. I intend to move for restoration of sister city funding, so I'll be doing that next meeting. I definitely will also support Will's existing motion, whether or not it gets amended, to support the restoration of neighborhood funding. I know that both Josh and I did have a question outstanding about other community engagement resources, and to Councilor Pryor's comment about building out a larger community engagement program, I would prefer to vote on the specifics of neighborhood newsletters with a little bit more information about these other engagement tools. So I don't know where staff is on answering that, but I'd love to, if we could have it by next week, it would be really helpful in terms of.
I think they've done anything on that yet.
It just says in process right now, so I think they're working on it, but that would help me to be able to vote or move or respond appropriately. So that would be great. Thanks.
Will and then Councilor Taylor.
I have as usual, a bit of a process question. I have not seen an agenda for our meeting, which is supposedly our final meeting next week. Is it strictly public comment and then deliberations, or what is the plan for next week?
So the plan for next week is public comment, and then the rest of your meeting is for deliberations and then a recommendation.
I'm just, so last week when I made a motion for restoration of neighborhood funding, which I agreed to let it be tabled, assuming it was going to be redone at this meeting. So now again, we're going to punt it again to next week. So it's what it sounds like. And I'm confused as to why we're not making substantive motions tonight and getting it over with, and that way we can have like a couple of substantive motions tonight, deliberate on them, vote on them, get them done, and move on to some other agenda item. Like, is there a reason we're just putting them all at the last day?
That's a decision that I made based on some advice I got. I know that there are a lot of people who have intended motions to put out here, and a lot of people who want to make comments on intended motions. And to me, the best decision we could make for this committee is to get all that comment out tonight, so we can get the best motions on the table and get through them in an efficient manner in the next meeting.
The goal being to put the motions out so that we can get public comment on them? I mean, is that part of the reasoning?
They will be available. From the minutes from this meeting, I would say. I don't know how they'll be available to the public before next meeting.
Right. So we will have the minutes come out on Friday, and there is a public comment period. So as we have done in the past, we've usually had the motions at the last meeting to provide an opportunity for the public to comment on the motions and the conversation at the previous meetings.
So I want to state for the record that I am definitely in favor of restoring ongoing funding for neighborhoods at least a $60,000 level. I could probably be convinced to go up to 75, and I'm definitely in favor of restoring the Sister City funding. My family actually hosted a Kakagawa student a couple of different years when I was in high school, and it was definitely a very informative and enlightening experience. So I think that those programs do great work.
Great, thanks. Councilor Taylor and then Councilor Surratt.
Okay, I was going to say I'll make a motion about Sister City funding. I really want to do more than restore it. I remember when we had it $40,000, and that was a restoration from a previous reduction. It should be a lot more. But anyway, and I do like the way we're doing this. I like it that people say what they're thinking about doing, and it gives the public, if they want to comment, a chance. And also it gives all of us a chance to comment about what people have said and maybe talk to others about what they're thinking about, for example, about Sister Cities. So I like the way we're doing it. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Surratt and then Josh.
Thank you. So I intend, most likely as a friendly amendment to Ken's motion on human services funding, to propose dedicating one-time $25,000 of the one-time HSC allocation for direct support to our Rest Stop program. And when we get to that, I'll speak to it more fully, but online, if you go to Community Supported Shelters website, you can actually, on one of their FAQs, they have a little listing of what it costs to get one up and running and what it costs to maintain, at least for the ones that they do. And it's about, if my memory serves me, it's about $10,000 to get one started, and about $8,000, I think, a year to keep it up and running. or I might have that backwards. So $8,400 for material cost to set it up, and $10,000 a year per safe spot, and those are providing 20 individuals with safe legal places to be sheltered. And then I definitely support the motions that I've heard folks saying they have intended to make. $10,000 for our Sister City program is a teeny tiny amount of money relative to our entire budget, and certainly very added value to our city culturally and in many other ways. And neighborhood newsletters, I really appreciate the conversation around that, both the specific of restoring that funding and then the more general of Councilor Pryor getting kind of nudging us to think about how do we want to invest in community engagement in a more broad and deep way going forward. And then I've probably forgotten something that someone mentioned that I liked, and I'll speak to it next week.
Thank you. Josh, and then I'm up.
Just a quick one, following on Councilor Pryor's comment about having flexibility in the use of those funds. If we could just be, and I like the idea of having more money available for it, as Will suggested, he'd be open to. There should be something where we're explicitly calling out the possibility of supporting neighborhood association outreach efforts that are really the need for which is the result of other city policies. So the MUPTI example, the MUPTI Review Committee example for downtown is maybe the best example, but surely we're going to have others. So if we could just call that out explicitly in the motion, that would be great.
Great. So I'm next in the queue, and then Councilor Evans. I too am in favor of a lot of the motions I've heard, proposed motions I've heard today. So the Sister Cities funding seems, so small, and I definitely think it's a valuable program. So I would be in support of a motion there. I'm very much in favor of Ken's motion for the HSC funding to be increased by on an ongoing basis, and I'm definitely in favor of that. And specifically, I wanted to speak to the motion around neighborhood funding. The motion that Will put forth specifically has in it the language that the money goes towards newsletters. I spoke about this last week, but I really feel like the broader goal there is engagement with our communities, and newsletters really restricts how we can use that funding. For my neighborhood association, we just don't have the capacity to write a newsletter. We send out postcards, and we have some fantastic events that draw hundreds of people, and we're really better equipped to have those events to engage our community. And so I would really encourage us to modify that amendment so it's a little less restrictive.
Be amended, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Councilor Evans.
Well, based on this discussion, I'll address two things. One is I did have a chance to read Councilor Brown's intended motion at 4:30 on my phone this afternoon, and I am in favor of restoring the, cahoots van. I think that given the commitments that we're making to community court, to creating this kind of continuity between different systems and different pieces of the criminal justice system and morphing into a more humane way of treating people, that this is an important restoration to make. The second thing with this is that for me, I had a chance to go out and ride with firefighters last summer, and I saw the stress on that particular system and the fact that when our firefighters are called out to quote-unquote emergency situations, sometimes these are not situations that are appropriate for fire staff to be addressing, that could be better addressed through a cahoots response to a situation or an incident. And so that would provide a significant amount of relief on our fire staff as well as our police department. The other thing in the issue of community engagement and community involvement, I'm going to go back to an earlier comment I made about the Citizen Involvement Committee, and I think that that's not an appropriate discussion for the Budget Committee right now. but it would be something that I think that I want to bring up as a work session later to talk about the next fiscal year and how we do a comprehensive look and overview about reestablishing a citizen involvement, citizen engagement committee / process that will, begin to bring us back to some points that we had in the past where we had real healthy official engagement and involvement. And I think that this is something that is critical that we need to focus on, and we need to look down the line at future budgets and how we can establish a placeholder in whatever section of the budget that we're looking at to create support for citizen involvement and citizen engagement program that is robust, that is healthy, and that will help inform council decision-making processes, specifically around policy, and hopefully inform staff in terms of the application of that policies.
Anyone else for round one? Okay, Councilor Surratt.
Yeah, thanks. So that reminded me of the one I missed, which was the Cahoots van motion, that I definitely support the idea of expanding the Cahoots services. I noted in our packet in answering that question, staff noted the attached chart shows Cahoot demand by hours of day. I don't know if I found that chart, or maybe I just, I see it there. That demand is low between 3 a.m. and 11 a.m. I suspect part of that is that folks who might typically call for service on behalf of someone else in crisis are asleep, but that doesn't mean that those folks aren't still in crisis at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and in need. So I'm pleased that Councilor Brown wants to put that motion forward. I have a process question or request. In the past, when we've had more dicey budget discussions, we would project our motions up on the screen. And I think even though we're looking at some positive additions as opposed to figuring out what cuts we're going to make, I still think that's an important thing. So I hope I see head nods over there that we'll get that for next week. Then I had a question about the city manager's motion that Councilor Pryor says he'll put on the table next time, which is the motion reads to remove from the FY17 proposed budget the $500,000 proposed for 2021 and place the funds in a designated reserve. City manager, can you speak to what you intend by a designated reserve? What does that mean? What does that mean for that money?
What our intent with the 2021 money, as we talked about a little bit last week, and I put in that memo to the budget committee, is this is really a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do something within the community. We don't know exactly what that is yet, and so the idea was to set aside money to do any numbers of things that might be helpful and inspirational. The idea of if we move it into its designated reserve, what that means, it just sits there until eventually ultimately the council has to reappropriate that at some time down the road. And what we're suggesting is that as we move into the fall, the council has some more conversations about this whole topic, decides how you would choose then, if you would choose to redesignate or reauthorize dollars for something, and we can have a fuller conversation around that. So that's what that would do.
Thank you. That's the last person in the queue. Are there other comments?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Thanks. So Councilor Surratt asked last week about more specifics on the Green Hill contract increase, and so I appreciated the information that was provided. This is more of a comment, but talking about animal services and the First Avenue shelter is definitely something that this body's been talking about since I've been involved. And given, I know that we will not be specifically going back to the multi-year financial plan in this process, but seems to me that, I know that the First Avenue Shelter, if I recall, was part of the multi-year financial plan, and so that this kind of thing doesn't have to keep coming back, I guess I would maybe say it would be valuable to think about prioritizing that the next time we look at the multi-year financial plan for resources, because it feels like this is just a continuous Band-Aid solution rather than actually looking at the capital needs around this facility. So that would be comments when we get to that stage in the process.
Josh?
So, for the record, I support Councilor Brown's motion on cahoots as well. I think it's a great idea and it fits with other things that we're talking about here. I wanted to explain a little bit about why I had a comment about the multi-year financial plan in here. And I'm really asking for feedback from people here. It struck me, and I realize it didn't necessarily strike everyone this way, and staff informed me gently that I was perhaps more enthusiastic about the multi-year financial plan than most other people. But what I took away from looking at the multi-year financial plan is that it is the only view of its kind that we have foreseeing a whole range of, several $100 million worth of things that the community could very well expect us to find a way to pay for, with enough advance warning that we could actually have real deliberation about it, and might even be able to advance to or suggest for council that there be conversations about new revenues and so on. So I would like, and when I asked for updates to it innocently, I found that it's something that gets updated at a fairly long interval and hasn't been used this way in the past. I have heard this. We haven't done that in the past before. I'm mindful of that. But I guess what I'm asking is there some other view of this? And if there isn't, is there some way that we could have, and it's great for staff to comment on this as well, if there isn't some other view, then how else are we supposed to be doing multi-year financial planning other than taking a look at these items and trying to find a home for them or trying to get updates on them? And maybe part of it is just a matter of getting some regular updates. Actually, John, last time you had a slide that sort of alluded qualitatively to the multi-year financial plan items, but we have plenty of quantitative detail. It would be helpful to get some report. So we'll leave it at that for people. No takers?
Well, I'll put in 2 cents on that.
Okay, well.
This $500,000 for the track and field, for the event here in 2021, is a great example of a thing that could be in the multi-year financial plan. Along with, that's it. To me, that's like a perfect example of what that type of tool could be used for.
So just to kind of reiterate in our response, so the multi-year financial plan was intended to be a tool, an inventory, if you will, a place that we can capture things that don't make it to the CIP, right? So there's some things that might eventually end up there or not, but it's a way to capture unfunded needs that are important for departments, and so we track those. And one of the things that we've talked a little bit about is that we look for opportunities to move things forward on that list, right? So there's a whole list of different things. Sometimes a grant will become available, sometimes a new revenue source will become available, or the Parks and Open Space Master Planning right now is a really good example. There's a lot of items in the multi-year financial plan that touch on many of those areas, and so that may be a solution that moves a lot of those things off of the multi-year financial plan. The next full update of the multi-year financial plan will be presented at the same time we do the CIP update, which will be this next winter. And it's a 2-year look that we kind of keep as an inventory, and we do pay attention to it because it helps us be mindful of things that are on the horizon or priorities that we do need to eventually get done. But we haven't used it as a tool as strategically as what you're speaking to, Josh, with the budget committee, and we're open to whatever discussion council wants to have about the multi-year financial plan, but we've mostly used it as an internal planning document.
Other comments? Councilor Evans?
I think, Josh, probably the nuance here is that what we're looking at more is driven by the CIP than the multi-year financial plan. And particularly when we talk about, for example, public works, street improvements, you know, and what we have in terms of the inventory of back, you know, improvements that we need to make, we want to make, what's going to be happening over an extended period of time. And I think that that's more of our guiding indicator than, you know, the multi-year financial plan, because it has more relevance in what is going to be real time happening next year, following year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, down the line. That, you know, it, from my perspective, is the more operational document here.
Scott.
Does that make sense?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'll let you finish.
Scott.
I just wanted to bring up and be mindful of some of the restrictions around some of the money, especially when it comes to the associations and the communities. And I think Councilor Pryor had a great point on the engagement piece. And if we don't restrict the money to newsletters, if we look at the ways it can be used, maybe that's a piece that we can use throughout the year to study for incorporation into a larger engagement process and kind of a pilot. So I think that's something to look at. Then with the Cahoots van, if we say we want one 24/7, a third van for that purpose, then maybe that restricts the vans to that function. They don't have the flexibility to scheduling at peak times. Maybe we need two vans at peak hours, and maybe we should just say we need a third van to respond appropriately and let them tell us and show us the data, and we can take a look at that.
Thanks. Councilor Surratt.
Yeah, I appreciate Scott's comments about the Coots van, because I was thinking kind of along the same lines. I do think most likely 24/7 coverage is justified. But I also think we need to make sure that we're communicating with the potential provider of that service, which would be Whitebird, that we're engaging in a best practice as we add that extra resource. And then I was trying to look through my paperwork, and I couldn't see. When we restored the one-time funding for the neighborhood outreach, did we specify that it needed to go towards newsletters in the last budget round?
Matching grants and newsletters.
Right. It was actually matching grants and by newsletter, that's usually, those are outreach dollars. We don't designate newsletter dollars versus outreach dollars. There's a pot of money that every neighborhood association has designated for outreach.
So when the budget committee passed that motion, did it specify for outreach and matching grants?
No.
It just said for neighborhood.
For the program of
okay.
Newsletter and matching grants.
Because I'm hearing a lot of conversation about wanting that money to be flexible. In my mind, that's not necessarily a role of the budget committee to say it's going to, I guess we could say it should go to these specific items. But what I was hearing was we want staff to work more collaboratively with the neighborhoods, which I agree is good intent, but I don't know that would be appropriate to put in a motion around designating the dollars there. So I just put that out there for consideration.
So I'd like to ask another clarifying question around the neighborhood dollars. As I understand our budget, we have money, maybe it's outreach and communications, but we're only allowed to spend certain dollars on events. And so that would be my concern in all this, that we're specifically saying it's open because events are engagement. If that makes sense.
Currently, the current guidelines that are approved by council require that neighborhoods send 2 newsletters a year to their entire membership. And other than that, any dollars left beyond that can be used for any kind of outreach, written or otherwise, events, newsletters, all of the above.
Thank you. Any other comments? Josh.
Well, I'm going to make what I think is my last MYFP multi-year financial plan comment, maybe for this budget cycle. And I appreciate Councilor Evans' clarifications. I think that helps a little bit. I would encourage everyone on the Budget Committee, especially the councilors, to go back and look at it. It's almost $450 million at that version. I realize there have been changes since then. There has been no snapshot, no single snapshot that allows us to see how many and which of those items and what degree they've been addressed. But, you know, $450 million, 449, sorry to round, through 2021, not a particularly distant fiscal year. So I think if we're not seeing a snapshot on this, what is really a fairly medium-term, not even long-term budget planning view, I think then we're falling down on oversight. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Councilor Breyer.
Just to follow up on that, I think that's actually a good idea. It always behooves us to take a look at those kinds of documents. In addition to the multi-year financial plan, there's also the PROS plan. There's the facility condition report. There's a number of additional plans in addition to the CIP that we have to be mindful of, and we should be revisiting all of those in terms of what kind of policies to set around what we spend to maintain what we've got. Because really, at the end of the day, that's really what the principle is here. Do you take care of what you've got? And then once you've taken care of what you got, do you add anything to it? And I think it's a worthwhile conversation for us to have once again at the council level to say exactly what we would do. I think the multi-year financial plan fits into that, along with several other documents. Transportation, my head starts to spin when I think about all of the amounts of money over and beyond what you're talking about that we would need to spend in order to really effectively take care of what we've got and make investments the community expects us to make. And we just have to keep plodding away at it. But it's back to your earlier question about the linkage between our priorities and our budget. And how that conversation's also, which the council also, it's within their purview to figure out what that looks like.
All right. Seeing no other comments, I want to ask staff what we can do in terms of, I know there were a lot of intended motions stated tonight. How would you like us, did you capture all those? Would you like those sent to you? Can you provide some clarification?
Actually, if you have an intended motion, even if you spoke to it here this evening, if you could send it to me in an email, I will compile all of those and I will send them out so folks can see them before the next meeting. That would be helpful.
So if we could get those motions to Twyla, I'd say no later than Friday so that we can have those over the weekend, that'd be great.
That would be helpful, thanks.
Okay. So we'll just move into the wrap-up of the meeting. The next meeting is on May 26th with a 6:15 start time. We'll begin with a public hearing, followed by deliberations, and then we'll have the recommendation of the FY17 proposed budget. And yeah, get those motions in. Any other comments before we wrap up this evening?
Why are we starting at 6:15? 5:30. Will we run out of time?
The city manager can be here at 6:15, so we were going to start at that time rather than 5:30. Dinner will be available at 5. Folks can come and...
So it's John's fault. It's my, yes.
Isn't it always?
Okay, any other comments? All right, we're adjourned.